Starting a new book today, Hellbent for Election by Phyllis Speshock. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. This version was published in 1964. Chapter 1. The transition was immediate. I was, at the one instant, writhing in my bed beneath a circlet of pale, troubled faces, and in the last half of the same, in the outer office of the High Registrar. I seemed to be seated, and yet I had no body. There were other presences, like myself, in the room, which was no room at all, only space. I could not see them, and yet I knew they were there. The one seated at my left turned to me and said, "Where there are three ahead of you. You will have to wait your turn." "Yes," I said. "I know." I did not know how I knew. I only knew. I also knew their personalities and what they had appeared to be on Earth. Across from me sat Mrs. Snob. "I hope," she said irritably, "my glorified body will have no wings. I am allergic to feathers. I would abhor the odor and upkeep. And how should my robes hang?" Next to her, Complete Trust smothered a grin, though he had no face. You will not have wings," he said with assurance, "nor will you have any of the old physical problems." She sighed heavily. "I detest waiting. I have always detested waiting. I hope I will be assigned to the nicer section with presences more my own type. I mean no offense," she added quickly. "However, you were a custodian, weren't you?" "I was a janitor," he said with directness and some amusement. She sighed again. "My husband owned a small factory and then, look, since you do not seem to mind the waiting and suspense as much as I do, although you were here first, I wonder." The present seated next to me said sternly, "You must take your proper turn." I glanced at him, though I had no eyes. His name was Rigid Pharisee. This time I sighed. He did not notice. He only leaned closer and hissed in my ear, which was no ear at all. "Lawbreakers. Oh, wait until they get inside. Wait until they receive their assignments. Oh, that fluttering peahen. Oh, can't she see she's broken every rule in the church covenant? Can't you? Can't you?" I had the sensation of taking a deep breath. "Yes," I said, "I can see." "Imagine," he snorted, "the smell of smoke in this place." "Yes," I said, "imagine." What I was really trying to imagine was what it might be like not to be in this place at all. But then he went on, "And that fatuous fool, Complete Trust. How often I have seen his kind with their sweet smiles and their nodding heads and their leave them to the Lord philosophy. Don't they know the brethren must be corrected? Don't they know the stronger of us?" But suddenly the outer office seemed expanded. Invisible chairs appeared and were at once filled with young presences. I knew, with no one telling me, that they had been a youth group on their way to a rally. The receptionist materialized from the mist surrounding the desk at the end of the office. "Mr. Trust, come this way." The voice was high and clear, the garb was long and luminous, the face was clearly defined and expressionless. They disappeared behind the great white iridescent door. There was a rustle among the young presences. Rigid Pharisee named them aloud. "Saved by faith without understanding. Oh, what a pity they hadn't longer to warrant this reward." Mrs. Snob moved across to sit at my right. "Children upset me," she said. "And what was that receptionist, male or female?" "Up here," I heard myself saying. "That is of no importance." Rigid Pharisee approved of this. "Aha! I see you have read the Gospels. That is good. That is good. It is more," he added, leaning toward me, Then I can say for you. If he had had a finger, I felt sure he would have pointed it at her. She drew her bodiless form erect. Weren't you, she said coldly, some kind of bricklayer who fancied himself a lay preacher? I, he said fiercely, was a man of God. Ill health kept me from schooling, but never forget that he who sitteth at the right hand of the Father began his physical life as a carpenter's son. She mused. I've wondered about that. But then the receptionist was before her. Mrs. Snob, come this way. And they were gone, with only the click of the huge gold latch behind them. She'll get hers, Pharisee chuckled. I hope they assign her to my mansion. I'll see she's purged. There was another restless movement among the young presences, and suddenly a very old presence was seated beside me. Her name, I knew immediately, was Mrs. Insecure. I made it, she said with a conspicuous, non-existent tears. I never read the book all the way through, you see, and at the last minute I had some doubts. Probably skipped Leviticus, Pharisee snorted. I wonder if my husband will be here, she countered, a tremor in her voice. He was a small man, slight, skeptic was his name. I don't suppose you've... No, I said. We've just arrived ourselves. I'm probably not here, Pharisee said with conviction. Doesn't deserve to be if he spent his time doubting. But then the receptionist was standing before him. Mr. Pharisee, come this way. He arose, and I imagined for a second that he tried to give me a reassuring wink. I'll put in a good word for you, he said. Though he was indistinguishable, I could see him swaggering. Mrs. Insecure fidgeted along with the young presences, but for a different reason. I don't like that creature, she said. That rigid Pharisee. His kind was half the cause of my husband's doubting. In the first place, there were science and history, but in the second place, why believe if it turned you into one of those? Yes, I said, I understand. You seem like a nice sort, she said then. Not at all opinionated. It's difficult to believe of you. What is difficult to believe of me? That your name could be what it is. Oh, I said. And then the receptionist stood before me. Mr. Hellbent, come this way. And that is the end of chapter 1.